along about the same time we started New Day, I started praying with one of my intercessor friends who prays regularly with me and for me, to pray for a house where people could also practice living together and doing these kinds of things, because that was one of the things some of these students wanted to do. And you okay?
Wrong button.
Oh. We didn't have any money for a house, and I didn't know anybody that had any money for a house. So I didn't know. So we just prayed for a house. And my friend Sherry said to me one day, this was in early July, and she says, "I see a house coming. It's going to be here soon." And I said, "Fantastic." And lo and behold, it was like 2 weeks after she said this to me, I got a phone call from one of my neighbors. And by then, I did know all the neighbors, because we actually do have potluck dinners in our neighborhood that we started, and we do all that in our middle-class neighborhood. But my neighbor didn't know anything about my desire to do this kind of ministry. She just knew that I taught at Perkins and that I'm ordained, and that was about the extent of her knowledge of that. So the neighbor calls, and she says, "I don't know if you'd be interested in this or not, but my mother has a rental property that's vacant, and she wondered if you might have some students who might live there for a year. They'd have to pay their own utilities, but we would be willing to subsidize the rent. Do you know anybody that needs housing like that?" And when I started to go, "Yeah!" And she said, but wait, I have to tell you, it's in kind of a shabby neighborhood. It's sort of a mixed income neighborhood. It's not really dangerous, but it's not really very nice either. And I'm like, "You've got to be kidding." And so I threw the phone down, ran to her house, we jumped in the car, we drive over. It's precisely what we were praying for. The house came, okay? The house came. And so we had it just for a year. It was just enough for a pilot so we could get started. And I asked Megan and 2 other of our women students to come. I asked the students that I'd already had these conversations, and I knew that they were single women and had a little more flexibility, and they immediately said, "Yeah, we'll give it a try." And I said, "What I'd like you to do is help me figure out what kind of parameters we need to put in place in order to have a program where we do this." So they were willing to risk and fail and make mistakes so we could all learn from it for a year. And they did a great job. And so that was our first year. That was a little pilot year. At the end of the year, we needed to give the property back to the owner. But it was right as that year was wrapping up that I met Larry Duggins, who you got to see and hear from on the video, in the thin space of Iona. And the rest of it's history. So now we have this foundation that we formed in order to have an umbrella under which, through which to fund the housing for the Epworth project. The housing, we have a variety of ways. Some houses we rent, some housing we rent, some we own, and some it's other. I'll get into that in a minute, how we do each one of those. So that's how we got started with the Missional Wisdom Foundation. Again, this is about developing disciples. It's about developing leaders and developing missionaries. Dietrich Bonhoeffer is the one who coined the phrase new monasticism. He wrote a letter to his brother that said, this is the quote from the letter, "The restoration of the church will surely come to form a sort of new monasticism, which has in common with the old only the uncompromising attitude of a life lived according to the Sermon on the Mount in the following of Christ. I believe it is now time to call people to this." So here's a Lutheran pastor in Nazi Germany saying, our only hope is to introduce some kind of new monasticism into the church. That's our hope. And he was influenced, by the civil rights, the early generation of the civil rights movement before it was full bloom. He was influenced by that, and influenced by Gandhi and some other interesting people. So Dietrich Bonhoeffer is an important source of inspiration for the new monastic movement, and definitely for the work that we are doing. I find it helpful to explain that when I'm talking to lay people or even clergy about new monasticism, because the words are riddled with baggage, just like the word evangelism is riddled with baggage, right? So knowing that it came from a Lutheran pastor, that kind of helps a little bit. Okay, so what do they do when they live in the Epworth Project houses? They follow a Wesleyan rule of life, which we've already talked about, and you have a pretty good idea what that looks like. They pray together with a daily office. I think all of our communities are now using a new resource called Common Prayer. It came out of the new monastic group, So Shane Claiborne, Jonathan Wilson Hartgrove, the Northumbria community, and quite a few Wesleyans actually contributed to it. It's an ecumenical resource, and you can, if you're not familiar with it, you can go online. You can actually, oh, here we go. See, she brought a copy. Thank you. She gets extra cookies for having a demonstration for us. Yeah. It's also online, so you can go every day and go to the readings and follow the prayers. And because students are living in the house, their schedules change from semester to semester. So every semester they have to renegotiate when are they going to meet for that prayer. Is it going to be night? Is it going to be morning? And when possible, they do morning and evening prayer. They're required to serve at least 4 hours a week in mission in their neighborhood. And we established the houses very carefully in neighborhoods where we could connect them to some kind of mission that we could plug them in, so that we didn't have to reinvent the wheel and create the mission. Why would we do that? Why would we do that? So we looked around and saw, where do we see the Holy Spirit working? Where are the people doing a good job of community development, empowering the local people, etc.? And so we plugged them in there. They're required to participate in either New Day or Christ Foundry or another multicultural missional community as their worship community. Because part of this project is to immerse them in alternative ways of being the church, missional ways of being the church. So we want to give them every opportunity to learn the new ways. And they receive subsidized rent. Either part or most of their rent is subsidized. And they pay for their own utilities, their own food, their own living experiences. Some houses share a partial common purse for groceries and things like that. Some houses don't. They have the freedom to figure that out from house to house. We have a very rigorous screening process for them to get into the project. I'll show that to you after I do this. I'll go online and show you the website. This year, when we start screening applicants in the spring, we will also have a criminal background check that we do on them. It's not risk-free. It's not risk-free. You can do all the criminal background checks in the world and miss pedophilia, for example. And do you know that in the DSM, when you're testing people for personality disorders and all that stuff, you cannot identify a batterer? Isn't that something? So there is no risk-free way to do risky ministry. I just want to say that. Okay, here's the Phoebe Palmer house, and that's Megan that I've told you about. That's Megan right there. And that's the house. It's pretty close to TCU. I think it's 3 miles away or something like that. And there are 5 women living there now. We just accepted a latecomer into the community for this year. So now there's a pastor in there. All the people living in the house are women. One of them has a 2-point appointment. She's a pastor at a small church, and she's the Wesley Foundation director for a small college that's in the Fort Worth area. Then there's Megan. Her paid job is Wesley Foundation director. So we've got 2 Wesley Foundation directors in there cooking up all kinds of creative ideas. Right? There's a woman living here who's a public school teacher in a sort of low-income school. There's a person who coordinates community gardens and the food bank in the area. So that's very interesting. This house has an amazingly large and fertile backyard, so we're getting ready to put in some gardens back there where they can grow organic vegetables as part of the work they do in the neighborhood. And then there's another person, I think, who's a student, maybe a doctoral student or something like that. She's there too. So that's who lives there. And this house has a connection. Megan attends First United Methodist of Fort Worth on Sunday mornings, and she participates in some of their music and things that they do. But they have started a house church that meets in this house. They have people from the neighborhood and people from the city who come who are de-churched people, but they feel comfortable coming to worship here. And this house is also becoming a retreat center where people come for day retreats to learn contemplative practices. So there are increasing points of connection between this house, its neighbors, TCU, and First UMC. All right. This is Oscar Romero house. That's Amy, who was our house pastor last year. We have to put the new Amy. We only have Amy's in there as house pastor, right? We're going to put the new Amy's picture, but you got to see her in the video. And this house is in an eclectic neighborhood. It's in an area with lots and lots of low-income Hispanic people, and their housing mixed in with middle-class houses, sort of. It's a mixed-income neighborhood. So what they're doing, this house is, the missions that the people living in this house do are out of Christ's Foundry, which is a missionary church, a United Methodist mission church that was established in that neighborhood. And so they do ESL classes, and the students living here get involved with after-school programming and helping with the youth and things like that, visitation of people. And this house is also becoming a place where prayer vigils are held. They're going to have more, this year, more neighborhood barbecues for teenagers and some things like that, because this house has a big backyard too. So it's a hospitality house for the neighborhood. That's another thing that they do in our Epworth houses. They have to have a community dinner once a week, and that's for the neighbors to come to, and anybody else, but they're really urged to invite the next door neighbors to come to the community dinner, bring some food, and have a potluck and just have some fun. So they're doing that. Dietrich Bonhoeffer House, it won't surprise you that we picked that name, right? Those are the guys that live there. Two of them just graduated, or one of them just graduated, and the other one will graduate in December, and the other two are current students. This house is owned by Grace United Methodist Church, which is right next door. This is a neighborhood that's also eclectic. Once upon a time, that was the neighborhood that the governor and the mayor and people like that lived on that street. So you have these big old amazing houses mixed in with a lot of homeless people and low-income apartments, so it's very interesting. And Grace United Methodist Church has an interesting history. It's not a numerically large church, but it was the first Methodist church in Dallas. It was the first one to be established in Dallas, and it was the church where the mayor went to worship back in the day. All right. So today, that's a very diverse neighborhood, and it's a diverse congregation. And theologically, they're very progressive. They care about all those things that progressives care about. So this house, at one time, was a duplex. It's on the Historic Homes Register, so when we painted it, we had to pick the right colors. Before we started using it for Dietrich Bonhoeffer House, it was used for the Center for Survivors of Torture. The Refugee Services of Texas, up until I think this year, used the old parsonage, which is right next door, for their offices, and now they just moved out to a larger facility so they could help more people. So anyway, when the Center for Survivors of Torture moved out, and these would be people, refugees coming who've survived horrible things, and they would get therapy and support while they're healing and in recovery. So the house has this long history of being a healing place, but the house was seriously in need of help before it could be livable by anybody, and they couldn't rent it out. It had no central air or heat. It had no insulation in the walls. The plumbing was shot. It was just a wreck. So, but the roof was excellent. Okay, the roof was great, and the porch is pretty decent. So the Missional Wisdom Foundation entered into an agreement with Grace UMC that we would rehab the inside of the house, make it livable in exchange for 5 years of free rent. And they agreed to do that. And we told them these guys would be living there. We told them these guys would be a liaison between Grace and its neighbors. We told them these guys were not there to serve all the people inside the Grace Church. You know what I'm saying? They were there to help build a bridge with the outside world, okay? So that's what they do. And that's Dempsey, the monastic dog, in the bottom there. He's a good boy. So what they do, these guys do a lot of ministry with homeless people, as Brandon said on the video. And they have all kinds of interesting folks show up for their weekly community dinners. They've had Bible studies in their house for the people at Grace to come and learn about a new monastic lifestyle, for example. So they've done some interesting things like that. We connected these guys, the Bonhoeffer brothers, with City Square, which is in that same neighborhood. City Square is a collection of different helping ministries like food pantry, thrift shop, community development, jobs help. City Square is one of the very best ministries in the city in terms of community development. They do it in a healthy way. They do it the right way. So City Square is mentoring these guys, and they're working there and working with AmeriCorps to learn how to do community development ministry. That's what they do with their volunteer hours. Make sense? Just a different environment. Okay. And then we have the William Seymour House. This is Amy and Brian McLean, who are at the top left-hand corner. They're Assembly of God co-pastors, and they are both students at Perkins. And they are both geniuses at working with at-risk youth. Amy and Brian bought that house, it's a duplex, in a rough neighborhood where there are a lot of kids involved in gangs, and they bought their house in the neighborhood so they could be there with those kids. Amy and Brian have children, and they bought their house in that neighborhood. Their children were teenagers, and the last one just went off to college. They're my kind of people. They did that. And so I really was impressed. I know Amy better than Brian because I've done some other things with her. So we asked them when their last child left and they had that duplex, they had room to welcome more people, if they'd be willing for the other side of their duplex to be an Epworth house, and they said yes. So they live on one side, and then we have a United Methodist couple on the other side, the young couple that's at the bottom right-hand corner. And Clay and Aaron go to, they participate in all the neighborhood activity. They have basketball out in the driveway, they have neighborhood potluck dinners, they have Bible studies for the kids. It's very oriented toward the kids in the neighborhood. And they've connected with probably 70 of the kids in the neighborhood, regularly doing activities with these kids. And so Clay and Aaron, the United Methodist couple, Clay is one of our students, are being trained in best practices of outreach with kids who are at risk for gangs in a mixed income neighborhood. They're being trained by Assembly of God clergy couple. The clergy couple is learning how to pray common prayer with printed prayers. Isn't that great? Yeah, because they meet every day for their prayers. They have to follow the rule of life together. And so it's a mutually enriching thing. They're doing a great job, and we're very proud of them. This is the Ammani house, and you saw them opening the door into the apartment and going in there in the video. And those are the guys who live there. There's one more person who lives there that's not in this picture. This is Peter, Gustav, and Sabu. And the picture in the lower right is where we were having one of our fiestas, and one of our people was playing soccer with some of the neighborhood kids. But the Ammani house also hosts New Day Vickery Meadow for our worship on Sunday evening and our fellowship. The two guys who are standing there in front of the tree, our little community is helping them to go to college. They're doing their pre-college English immersion right now. They're doing really well with learning English language, reading, writing, and verbal and all that stuff. And then when they finish that program, it's in one of our community colleges. We have a multicultural center, and so we're helping them go through that. And then they'll be ready to either go on to a traditional college program or to go to vocational school, and we're going to help them to do that too. Just out of our little, because since we're not paying salaries and buildings, we can pay for things like helping them go to school, which is totally awesome. And there's another person who's living there now who's seeking asylum, and we're helping him with all of that. And he's really wonderful. He was a pastor back in Burundi, and now he's with us and has really, really helped our community a lot. And so he lives there as well. So I think I've already told you about the Missional Wisdom Foundation, and I think that's the end of this slide. Okay, come and dream with us. What could intentional community look like in your context? I want to walk you over to the website. Hang on a minute. Yay, I'm on. It's www.missionalwisdom.com. And if you go to that, you'll see, here's the home page. It tells you about the Epworth Project. This is so when you go back home and you want to talk to people in your church, you can just go online. For New Day, it's www.peopleofnewday.com. And even that little video I showed you is on our website, and you can see it. And the video I just showed you now will be on this website within the next 2 weeks. We have to upload it. I don't think it's there yet. So here's the Epworth project. Yeah, that's our old video. And let's see here. I wanted to show you. Oh, see where it says, documents. These are our applications for people to come into the Epworth project. Feel free to rip them off. We have one for Perkins students, people at Bright, because Bright is there at TCU in Fort Worth. We have one for undergraduate students, non-students. Here's the covenant and rule of life for the Epworth project, and here's the covenant and rule of life for the pastors, the house pastors that coordinate the communities. So all that information is there, and you can look at it and see what's required for somebody to apply to the project. And then again, here's the academy, and it's a very simple site. You can go, here's the classes, click on faculty and the commitment. Okay.